How does seeing Earth from space reshape your definition of success and ambition?
Most success is measured with a very short fuse. If someone said, have you been successful based on a 10,000 year time scale? Nobody ever even thinks of success like that. Most successes are like, how'd you do this quarter? Or how'd you do this week? Or how'd you do today? How'd you do in that race?
Most listeners and readers that we have are young entrepreneurs and business people in general. Reading your books and seeing your content online, I've seen certain parallelisms in more or less measure. So I wanted to get into that. How does seeing Earth from space reshape your definition of success and ambition? That's something that's being talked about in the business world also.
Most success is measured with a very short fuse. Like if someone said, have you been successful based on a 10,000 year time scale? Nobody ever even thinks of success like that, or even on a 500 year cycle. In the last year, have you been successful based on a 500 year measurement? Like that doesn't even sound logical. Most successes are like, how'd you do this quarter? Or how'd you do this week? Or how'd you do today? How'd you do in that race? How'd you, maybe this decade? Being on board a spaceship, you see the whole world, but you also get a sense of eternity of time, of what the difference between 1,000 and 1,000,000 and 1,000,000,000 starts to become intuitive to you. Whereas in a normal life, you just get so wrapped up in the moment and the shortness of an individual human life. And so I'm just as focused on personal success and living the most out of each day and trying to have as successful a life as possible for myself, for my wife, for our children, for our grandchildren. But it gets put into a different temporal frame living on a spaceship. On my third space flight, we were up for 6 months. So we went from one side of the sun to the other. So we got to watch the entire world change seasons, and what I realized I was looking at was the world taking half a breath out of 4.5 billion breaths. And that it was immensely calming to realize the ancient, tough nature of our planet, the fact that there's been life uninterrupted for 4 billion years, that the Earth isn't going anywhere, life isn't going anywhere. We get all frenetically self-absorbed and self-important, and we're ruining the Earth, and it's never been as hard as it is right now. And, it's because we just only judge things through an extremely short temporal lens. And it is hugely optimism building to actually see the world for what it is. And it's hard to get that perspective in our daily busy bee little lives.
100% talking about that focus in high stakes environments, a space mission, or perhaps a startup in a lesser scale. How do you maintain focus? What's your advice on that? Some general tools, perhaps?
I think it's really important to have a clarity of purpose. How do you define success? If you don't have a clear definition of what success looks like you and I are having a conversation right now, we didn't really talk about it together, but both of us have an internal definition of if you and I do this perfectly, what will the result be? What will success look like? And if you don't have a clarity of understanding of what success looks like for your decision making, then how do you decide? If it doesn't matter what you decide, then how do you ever get anything done in your life? So I think trying to have focus, the number one most important thing is to clearly define what victory looks like. And it can be very, very simple. I went for a walk with my granddaughter this morning. And so you wouldn't even think about what does victory look like for a walk with your granddaughter. But it's very clarifying. What am I trying to accomplish? And if this goes perfectly, what will both of us take out of this experience together? And I find it very centering, because then you can figure out what you need to ignore. It's so easy to get distracted with all of the noise of too many choices and too much external input. But if you can clearly define victory and purpose, then you can go, okay, yeah, that's an interesting thing, but it doesn't matter. right now. So I'm not going to pay any attention to it until it's truly going to rear its head. And maybe the last thing is to deliberately absolve yourself from the things that don't matter. Allow the fact that if you're going to launch and pilot a rocket ship, there is nothing in the world that matters except the next 9 minutes. You have to give yourself permission to ignore everything else in the world except the successful piloting of the most complicated machine ever built. And I try to focus and align my whole life that way to be as purposeful and productive and on task as possible.
Awesome. You talked about clarity and purpose. How do you see manifestation, visualization? What are your takes on that in general?
Yeah, visualization and manifesting your own potential futures, I think, is very important. We allow ourselves to think that we have no control often because it's easy. You hear people all the time say, that's above my pay grade, or nah, that's not for me to worry about, and that's okay for things that are truly beyond your grasp. Like I am not at all involved in the economy of Sri Lanka. If it was important to me, I might start working on it. But on the flip side, that means I shouldn't let it worry me at all because I'm not part of it. None of my decision making is having an effect in that distant place and that particular subset of what's going on. So I think you need to recognize that some parts of your own life you have 100% dominion over. And the thing that you control, in fact, the only thing that you control is what you're going to do next. And so defining your goals and your purpose, and then being extremely responsible in how you choose what you're going to do next. What am I going to do in the next 10 seconds, the next 100, the next 10 minutes, the next today? How am I going to actually take responsibility for my own decision making, recognizing that your life is not what you set out to do? Your life is the strung together sequence of all the little things that you chose to do next. And if you make a habit of saying, that's not up to me to decide. No, I don't need to decide that. I'll just let things happen. Well, then your life is just going to happen. And then if you don't like it, then you're going to just sort of blame somebody else. I'm going to blame whatever, politicians, or I'm going to blame business people, or I'm going to blame the weather, or I'm going to blame my neighbor, I'm going to blame my spouse. I'm going to blame something rather than actually recognizing the immense power you have in your own decision making. And I take that part of my own life extremely seriously.